My name is Martha Allman, and I'd like to read to you one of my favorite stories. It's called The Blue Moose by Manus Pinkwater. Mr. Breton had a little restaurant on the edge of the big woods. When winter came, the north wind blew through the trees and froze everything solid, and then it snowed. Mr. Breton didn't like it. Mr. Breton was a very good cook. Every day, people from the town came to his restaurant. They ate gallons of his special clam chowder. They ate plates of his special beef stew. They ate fish stew and special homemade bread. The people from the town never talked much, and they never said anything about Mr. Breton's cooking. "Did you like your clam chowder?" Mr. Breton would ask. "Yup," the people from the town would say. Mr. Breton wished they would say, "Delicious," or "Good chowder, Breton," but all they ever said was, "Yup." And in the winter, they came to his restaurant on skis and snowshoes. Every morning, Mr. Breton went out behind his house to get firewood. He wore 3 sweaters, a scarf, galoshes, a woolen hat, a big checkered coat, and mittens, but he still felt cold. Sometimes raccoons and little rabbits would come out of the woods to watch Mr. Breton. The cold didn't bother them. It bothered Mr. Breton even more when they watched him. One morning, there was a moose in Mr. Breton's yard. It was a blue moose. When Mr. Breton went out his back door, the moose was there, looking at him. After a while, Mr. Breton went back in and made a pot of coffee while he waited for the moose to go away. But it didn't go away. It just stood in Mr. Breton's yard, looking at his back door. Mr. Breton drank a cup of coffee. The moose stood in the yard. Mr. Breton opened the door and said, "Shoo, go away," to the moose. "Do you mind if I come in and get warm?" said the moose. "I'm just about frozen." He brushed past Mr. Breton and walked straight into the kitchen, his antlers almost touching the ceiling. The moose sat down on the floor next to Mr. Breton's stove. He closed his eyes and he sat leaning toward the stove for a long time. Wisps of steam began to rise from his blue fur. After a long time, the moose sighed. It sounded like a foghorn. "Can I get you a cup of coffee?" Mr. Breton asked the moose. "Or some clam chowder?" "Clam chowder," said the moose. Mr. Breton filled a bowl with creamy clam chowder and set it on the floor. The moose dipped his big nose into the bowl and snuffled up the chowder. He made sort of a slurping, whistling sound. "Sir," the moose said, "this is wonderful clam chowder." Mr. Breton blushed a very deep red. "Do you really mean it?" "Sir," said the moose, "I've eaten some good chowder in my time, but yours is the very best." "Oh, my," said Mr. Breton, blushing even redder. "Oh, my, would you like some more?" "Yes, please, with crackers," said the moose. The moose ate 17 bowls of chowder with crackers. Then he had 12 pieces of hot gingerbread and 48 cups of coffee. While the moose slurped and whistled, Mr. Breton sat in a chair. Every now and then he said to himself, "Oh, my, the best he's ever eaten. Oh, my." Later, when some people from the town came to Mr. Breton's house, the moose met them at the door. "How many in your party, please?" the moose asked. "I have a table for you. Please follow me." The people from the town were surprised to see the moose. They felt like running away, but they were too surprised. The moose led them to a table, brought them menus, looked at each person, snorted, and clumped into the kitchen. "There's some people outside. I'll take care of them," he told Mr. Breton. The people were whispering to one another about the moose when he clumped back to the table. "Are you ready to order?" he asked. "Yup," said the people from the town. They waited for the moose to ask them whether they would like chowder the way Mr. Breton always did, but the moose just stared at them as though they were foolish. The people felt uncomfortable. "We'll have the clam chowder." "Chaudière de clam. Very good," the moose said. "Do you desire crackers or homemade bread?" "We'll have the crackers," said the people from the town. "I suggest you have the bread. It's hot," said the moose. "Well, we'll have the bread," said the people from the town. "And for dessert," said the moose, "will you have fresh gingerbread or apple jaquette?" Well, what do you recommend? Asked the people from the town. After the chaudière de clam, the gingerbread is best. Thank you, said the people from the town. It's my pleasure to serve you, said the moose. He brought bowls of chowder balanced on his antlers. At the end of the meal, the moose clumped to the table. Has everything been to your satisfaction? Yup, said the people from the town, their mouths full of gingerbread. I beg your pardon, said the moose. What did you say? It was very good, said the people from the town. It was the best we've ever eaten. I'll tell the chef, said the moose. The moose clumped into the kitchen and told Mr. Breton what the people from the town had said. Mr. Breton rushed out of the kitchen and out of the house. The people from the town were sitting on the porch putting on their snowshoes. Did you tell the moose that my clam chowder was the best you've ever eaten, Mr. Breton said. Yep, said the people from the town. We said that. We think you're the best cook in the whole world. We've always thought so. Always? Asked Mr. Breton. Of course, said the people from the town. Why do you think we walked 7 miles on snowshoes just to eat here? The people from the town walked away on their snowshoes. Mr. Breton sat on the edge of the porch and thought it over. When the moose came out to see why he was sitting outside without his coat on, Mr. Breton said, Did you know those people think I'm the best cook in the whole world? Of course they do, said the moose. By the way, aren't you cold out here? No, I'm not the least bit cold, Mr. Breton said. This is turning out to be a very mild winter. When spring finally came, the moose became moody. He spent a lot of time staring out the back door. Flocks of geese flew overhead, returning to lakes in the north, and the moose always stirred when he heard their honking. Chef, said the moose one morning, I'll be going tomorrow. I wonder if you would pack some gingerbread for me to take along. Mr. Breton baked a special batch of gingerbread, packed it into little parcels, and tied the parcels with string so the moose could hang them from his antlers. When the moose came downstairs, Mr. Breton was sitting in the kitchen drinking coffee. The parcels of gingerbread were on the kitchen table. Do you want a bowl of coffee before you go? Mr. Breton asked. Thank you, said the moose. I shall certainly miss you, Mr. Breton said. Thank you, said the moose. You're the best friend I have, said Mr. Breton. Thank you, said the moose. Do you suppose you'll ever come back? Asked Mr. Breton. Not before Thursday or Friday, said the moose. It would be impolite to visit my uncle for less than a week. The moose hooked his antlers into the loops of string on the parcels of gingerbread. My uncle will love this. He stood up and turned toward the door. Wait, Mr. Breton shouted. You mean you're not leaving forever? I thought you were lonely for the life of a wild moose. I thought you wanted to go back to the wild, free places. Chef, do you have any idea how cold it gets in the wild, free places? The moose said. And the food, it's terrible. Have a nice time at your uncle's, said Mr. Breton. I'll send you a postcard, said the moose. And there's the blue moose.